Start off by saying I'm sorry, and not because I don't have a vomit story. I'm sure I could find one for you all, but because I'm a serial apologiser. I grew up with a wonderful family around me, and my parents helped me grow up to be a strong and independent woman. But what I managed to do during that time while they were fostering all this greatness in me is sneak a heavy dose of just trying not to be a bother and just not wanting to have any impact and apologising for almost everything that I could to make sure that I wasn't a bother to anybody in my life. This really, I feel like some of you in the audience might be able to sympathise with me, especially when we're on hot mess night, and that's where everyone's brains are right now. I think you will know you're a hot mess apologiser if you're sitting up here on the balcony and you're the one sitting behind the pole, and everyone asked if you were okay, and you said, no, I can see fine. I see you because every month that's me. I also notice a couple of apologisers in the audience, or the people trying not to be a bother or trying to be the biggest help ever. When everyone was walking in here, very busy, very excited, getting our seats, they were the ones who were saving the seats for 10 people, and that's fine, you go to the bar, I'll look after everything, it'll be fine, and just beating off the barefaced audience as they all came in. I see you, and you are me. Hopefully, there's not minus thumbs up in the audience, absolutely. Thank you. Validation is what I crave. So I have a string of examples throughout my life, and so I'm going to share a couple of those with you. First of all, I grew up in the UK. I will get to why I don't have an Australian accent later. Why I don't have an English accent later. But I grew up, and at this time I was in about grade 4, and I was going to school in Scotland. My mother is a nurse, or was a nurse, she is now retired, and it was the last day of term for us at this school, and I think we were probably going to be moving from Scotland at that time. So last minute changes to nursing rosters, not the easiest thing in the universe to do. And so my mum, when I came to her that morning and said I wasn't feeling that well, and I think maybe I didn't need to go to school, she thought, well, this is going to be a bit difficult. Maybe you could just give it a go. You know, it's not going to be the usual very taxing day of primary school. I'm sure all of your activities are done, and most of that day, actually, we were supposed to be practicing and then performing the nativity play, which is something that I'm not sure Australian schools do a ton of, but in the UK, we do it a lot. Anyway, so I went to school not feeling well, was doing the practice for the nativity play, as you do, and I mentioned I was in Scotland, and as the angel Gabriel, played by my Scottish schoolmate, declared to the whole school, Mary, you're going to have a baby, which is on video and is my favourite thing of my childhood. The gift that the 3 wise men, of which I was playing one that year, gave to the entire school on the last day before Christmas holidays was chickenpox. Turns out I was sick. Cue my mother feeling very horrible about being the nurse and sending her child to school with a highly contagious disease. Luckily, I cleared up before Christmas. My brother, not so lucky that year, unfortunately. Really, I think that the time that I really invested in not being a bother was shortly after we lived in Scotland. My father is in the military and my mother was a nurse, so both very hectic schedules, and so they worked very hard and they got us into a lovely boarding school on the Isle of Wight. For those of you who know where the Isle of Wight is, we were away on the the East Coast in Bembridge, which is a lovely area, very quaint. But really, when your parents are very busy and they worked very hard to get you into this lovely school, it was kind of like, it's a boarding school, so kind of like Hogwarts, except no magic, which is very unfortunate, but more owls. So, so that was great. I tried as hard as I could to be the best kid that I could be, because everyone was working so hard to make sure that I had the best. So I was going to make sure that I was the very best that I could be and not be a bother as much as I could be. I remember vividly sitting in class, in Mr. Wakefield's class. Now, Mr. Wakefield, I mean, at the time, I would describe him best as 8 foot tall. He probably wasn't, but I was very small. I was only 9 at this stage. He was the headmaster of the junior school, and I was in his class, and he was walking up and down the aisles of the classroom, and I looked down at my handwriting, and it was demonic. It was all over the place, not usually up to my usual standard, and I was petrified, and I could see him, hear him, walking down these old classrooms along the floorboards. It was kind of like that T-Rex in Jurassic Park, and and every time he took a step, it was like he was getting closer and closer and closer, and then I could feel him right behind me, and he's like, "What on earth is that? You can do much better than that." And I instantly hid my hands under the desk. And he said, "Right, what have you got? Show me what you've got." He thought I was hiding something. And I absolutely was. And what I was hiding was 2 dislocated thumbs. In the class prior to English was sport. And I am professionally uncoordinated. And I went to catch a netball in said class. And when I went to catch it, the ball hit me on the end of my thumbs. And this bone went out and this bone went in. And I thought it would just fix itself. So I didn't let anybody know I struggled with getting changed, and I went to English and was struggling. So I vividly remember sitting in the back of Mr. Senior's car as they rushed me to emergency room, apologising and telling them that they probably didn't have to bother. I'm sure it would come good. I'm sure it just needed an icing or something like that. In hindsight, these are horrific stories, I do realise. I had a wonderful childhood. It really, I could go on and on with the stories. I mentioned before that I grew up in the UK, and now I have a very lovely Australian accent, and now I call Australia home, obviously. And the reason for that is when we first moved to Australia, I went to school in Sydney, and for the first term, everyone told me that was very hard to understand. I had a very proper English accent. I was like that little kid from The King and I. It was very obnoxious. So I was very aware of that. As soon as you have that in a classroom full of Australian children, you become the pariah. So I very quickly, within a term, adopted an Australian accent as quickly as I could. That just made sure that I didn't stand out, just made myself a little bit smaller in that universe. I have been a lifelong fan of gaming, and I hid that for the majority of my life until I was about 32 years old. Majority of the people in my life that I was close to did not know. I would sit in a shared house playing World of Warcraft while my friends watched The Bachelorette on TV, trying to pretend like I knew what was going on in the meantime of middle of doing a raid or something like that. Still I tell some of them that's what I was doing, and they, no way. Really, my friends also, one of which is here this evening, came up with the phrase that I don't need to apologise for existing, but I sometimes feel like I do. This, it is sad. This really all came to a head in what I like to call our collective sourdough era, or the pandemic. The policy of the company that I was working for at the time was that for health and safety reasons, the managers of the local branch would reach out to staff and make sure that they were doing okay. He reached out to me because I was on a special list because I had lived alone for many years. So not only was I isolated during this time, everyone else was isolated with their families and I lived by myself. I had lots of support around me, but it was health and safety that they sort of check in more regularly with me. My boss called me, my big boss called me, and he asked me how I was going and if I was doing okay. And I don't know why, and thankfully he's known me for a very long time. But that moment is the moment that I chose to answer that question honestly for the first time in my life. I was not okay. I had spent a very long time in my life trying to be as small as I possibly could. I went through a time where, especially during the pandemic, I played a very good role of sad millennial vignette. If you can picture that in your mind, that's exactly what it was. I would sit for hours just by myself in my apartment, not doing anything, just sit. I threw myself into my work. I thought that that would help me. I thought that the sleepless nights that I had could be converted into useful time, and I spent that researching academic papers and catching up on things, and I did really well in my career. My colleagues praised me for my commitment and my knowledge and all those types of things. They were telling me this was a good thing. I lost my appetite almost entirely. I lost a lot of weight, but my friends told me I looked great and that I was looking healthy, and the pandemic suited me. None of them mean this. I would love to say that no one was caring for me, but everybody was. The problem was I wasn't allowing them in to be able to have that conversation with me honestly. Every opportunity someone had to ask me if I was okay, I answered, but not truthfully until that very moment. So thankfully, after crying for a long time to my boss, we got some support through work, and that was great. But I hadn't finished spiraling out yet. Burnout really had a hold on me. For those of you who have been diagnosed with clinical burnout, that is exactly what it was. We found out a little while later. But I remember sitting in my apartment staring at that screen, choose which profile to turn on in Netflix. And I live by myself, so there's one profile. So I sat there and I realised suddenly it had been 3 hours that I'd been staring at that screen. No real thought as to how that had happened. I gathered up all the serotonin that I had left in my human body and decided that no, this was not me. I was going to cook myself a lovely dinner, it was going to be a big meal prep moment, and it was going to be great, and this was going to be the start of the new me. So I cooked up like a big batch, I think it was bolognese, pretty sure it was bolognese, in a huge pot, and as I turned around to put it down, to put it onto the plates and the various things, I tripped and I spilled it all over my apartment. I landed with my hand in the hot pan. I burnt my hand quite badly. I cried. Because that's what one does. And then I sat on the floor, ate what was left in the pan that did not fall on the floor. The mess lay on the floor for a week. This was, as you can already tell, quite a dark time in my life. I do remember vividly feeling like not necessarily suicidal thought, not taking my own life, but what if I just didn't exist? Wouldn't that be easier? What if just one day I just took that out, then no one would have to worry about me? The thing for me about taking my own life is that would be such a bother to everybody else. It saved me once. So I would go to therapy, and therapy would help, and that would fix it, and that's what everybody says you should do. And so that's what I did. It did help. It didn't fix it. There's a lot of hard work that needs to go into coming out of burnout, and still to this day, I am coming out of burnout. I take more steps forward than I take backwards, but I would be lying to say that it's not hard sometimes to take those steps forward. I took big steps in my life to make sure that I was who I am today, and this is one of them, standing on this stage and talking to you. It's been a long time since I've been on a stage. I finally got into touch with my actual self and realised and came out to my nearest and dearest as bisexual. I lived a life where I considered alternative relationship methods and ones that suited me, and made choices in my life that suited me. I explored polyamory, and I'm very happily polyamorous now. The best thing about polyamory is there is zero room for you to be small, because you need to prioritise yourself. You're in a relationship with yourself as well as your other partners. And I love that so dearly for me and for others. I think now the thing that I've learnt is that I only apologise when I'm meant to, or when it's deserved. I unfortunately lost some friends along the way, and probably because it only suited them to be friends with me when I was small. I have a big regret. My grandmother passed away late last year, and my biggest regret is that I didn't get a chance to really show her who I was and to get her to meet me. I hope that deep down she knew who I was before she passed away. I said that I would only ever apologise when it's needed. And so the only person I need to apologise to myself up here on stage is me. I'm not a hot mess. I am human, divine chaos.